This is Big Sky Voices. My name is Ben Boothe, and
I'm Victor Wuamett with Storyteller Films, and our guest today is
Rose Diaz. Rose is an astonishingly talented and has lived such a full and varied life. Let's see, you did your graduate studies here both at in UNM and in Arizona, right?
Right.
And then you got your PhD in Arizona after, by the time she got her PhD, she had already conquered the world, I think. And we met her. My wife was doing some volunteer work for the Pueblo Indian Cultural Center, and she met Rose, and she said, "This lady is an exceptional." And so we're so glad to have you here. Tell us, how did you get started? Where did you, on your path, what kind of got you started on the path that you've gone, which appears to be cultural studies, historic studies, and you can tell us a little bit about how you got going.
Well, first of all, I'm a public historian, which is a historian that works with communities. And so I'm not an academic historian. I am an academic historian in terms of the work I've done academically.
Right.
But my work as a public historian is working out in communities. So my trajectory was, when I was in junior high, I wanted to be a person who helped prisoners as they got out of prison to readjust to life.
in junior high.
In junior high.
Try to reduce what do you call it, recidivism.
Right, recidivism.
Yeah.
And then I went from that to being a traffic controller. That's what was my next guess. Until they went on strike, and then I had to turn to another occupation. My father was a great history reader, and so he would tell us the stories about what was going on there and how they were, how brave these people were, how brave, and just how could something last so long.
Wow.
And so. But he was also a history reader.
So you went from that sort of a background to, if I look at your resume, 14 or 15 boards or affiliations. I see you projects in Indianapolis, Washington DC, Smithsonian, coast to coast. You've been out there. You've done publications. How many publications have you been?
I've helped to co-author or to assist communities in writing their own histories.
So in terms of that, what are you doing right now?
Right now?
Because to segue into the community that you were mentioning.
Well, community history has always been very important to me because as a Mexican American, I've always felt that my history was either silenced, never heard about it, or it was mediated. It was told through someone else's eyes, who didn't understand the community, who didn't understand the cultural, the protocols, the traditions. And so my jobs have been all related to doing community work. And so from the time that I came here to UNM in 1980, I was in graduate school then, but then left and started working with special collections at UNM, and I was there for 25 years, and most of my work had to do with outreach.
So you're interviewing Pueblo women?
Correct.
Tell
So
us about
I
that
started
project,
as an
Ron.
oral historian 40 years ago.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you. Why an oral historian?
Because my advisor was an oral historian.
What I mean is, why is oral history important?
Well, that's one way to get a community's perspective. And
Okay.
so you can read the history books and you can say, okay, this thing happened and you're sure of it. But what you're not sure of is that really how it happened, because it's one person's perspective. So I like to think of oral history as sort of providing prisms of perspective, that everyone has a piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
And so you're trying to fill in these pieces, but on a personal level.
Yeah.
So, for example, a snowy day to you might be something very different to you.
Cold hands.
Yes, right.
Right.
So, warm heart, cold hands.
Yeah. So you get to mine way down to the depths of the cultural advances, conflicts, art, creativity, things that are a mystery to a lot of people because they never are exposed to it, right?
And that's basically, my role as a public historian, oral historian, has been to get these stories out, to get the communities themselves to invest in their own histories. And the project that you're referring to now, Journeys and Pathways, Contemporary Pueblo Women in Leadership, Service, and the Arts, came about because we were approached by the National Endowment for the Humanities to apply for a grant.
Right.
And I was ready to retire at that time. And so I agreed to do it if I could do it on a half-time basis.
Yeah.
And so we've now interviewed 20 women,
And you got the grant.
got the grant,
Yeah.
got all the interviews done this past year. And so now we have a series of interviews, both videotaped and transcripts,
Yeah.
that will be, the transcripts and the films will be housed and available through the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center library,
Yeah.
but also transcripts will go to the libraries of the community libraries or college libraries that the women have chosen,
Yeah.
and also the state archives and the Center for Southwest Research at UNM.
And
You know,
just for our viewers who aren't New Mexico people, you have 19 pueblos
We have 19
scattered up and
pueblos.
down the Rio Grande,
Correct.
basically.
8
Yeah.
northern, 8 southern, and 3 central.
I can imagine some of the stories you've heard. Can you share an interview or a story
Yes,
from
sure.
someone that's fascinating?
We have several women, and because of the way that we structured the interview, so we focused on their careers, and we've had some really interesting surprises. We had a woman who has started the first Pueblo food cooking school.
Wow.
Okay.
First
Which Pueblo?
From Okeowinge.
Okay, yeah.
And
So
it's
Native
called-
American recipes?
Right.
Wow.
And she's kind of adapted them, and she holds classes, she brings kids in, but she was also a homecoming queen. She was in the Navy. She is a farmer,
Yeah.
cattle person, and so she has this really interesting history behind her. And I think sometimes we forget that women have their own lives. We talk about women, and mostly my interviewing has been around women, because women have the least amount of voice, most amount of power, I think, but least amount of voice.
I would agree with you.
Why does she decide to teach her native her recipe? Why?
Well,
What
she felt
motivated her?
that food was a thing that brings people together.
Yes.
Ah, yeah.
All right.
And it brings families together, it brings communities together. The feast days where guests are invited from wherever they're from to come in, they're welcome as guests in people's homes. She just felt that it was important to share this. This was a talent she had, and she wanted to share it. So now she has international visitors who come. She's got school
Really?
kids who come. She caters.
Does she have a cookbook?
Not yet. She's working on that.
Okay, good.
So we're
Good.
excited about that. So we focused on their professional lives, but also how their professional lives crisscrossed their community lives, and that was a very interesting point of intersection.
If our viewers would like to listen to some of those interviews, are any of them available?
They will be available probably by next December,
I see.
December 2020.
I see.
YouTube?
I don't know.
Something widely
Yes,
available.
it will be available through our library website.
When you have been working on the library, the wonderful library that you've had a lot to do with building at the Cultural Center, that at some point y'all were trying to get the various tribes to contribute items that some of them may have thought were so important or so sacred or whatever, they didn't really want to turn loose of them. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how now y'all have become the repository of really things of great interest and value that even the Smithsonian has expressed an interest in?
Well, we've got some very interesting collections, and this library goes back to the very beginning when the center opened. It was formed in 1976, was run by volunteers for 40 years. And then they decided they wanted to do a grant, and wrote a grant and got monies to actually expand and stabilize what they have. So we went from about 150 titles to now well over 7,000.
Wow.
So that's the library, at the Pueblo
Center.
Cultural
Mhm.
Center here in Albuquerque.
Correct,
Right.
and it's focused primarily on Pueblo, but we also have sister communities, Hopi, Navajo, Apache, and we have the Native American Community Academy, which is on our campus.
Mhm.
So we also brought some materials together that I didn't want a student to come in and not find something about their life in our library. So initially, that's how we started. We had a few, interested individuals from the tribes. I think it's very difficult for people to give up any kind of, even papers. For example, I've worked in congressional papers and with congressional delegations, and they're very happy to give you their papers.
Yeah.
But in this sense, they're cultural property.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful about what we take in. However, the Smithsonian has a program, and one of our young women that we interviewed is a curator at the Smithsonian. And she works in a program where communities come in and get information about things that the Smithsonian holds. And they're able to identify things, and there's been some repatriation, but the communities learn about themselves as well as the Smithsonian staff learning about what value they have.
And some of their reticence perhaps is about, it doesn't just belong to me, my papers, they belong to my community, to my Pueblo, to my tribe.
Yeah, so things are more thought of collectively than they are individually.
Yes. I know you've had these magic moments, but can you share one maybe where you've seen an object or an artifact or something, and it just is like a time machine? It just, you think, oh my gosh, can you share something like that or experience?
Sure. During the Depression, there were very few minerals and gems available, silver, gold, things like that were all used in the war effort. So in Santo Domingo, they started collecting plastic. And so the Thunderbird necklaces that you see,
Yes, right.
those are a Depression era.
Born of necessity.
Born of necessity. Reds were the spoons from the Dairy Queen.
No.
Things that people
Nice.
threw off when they were, the kids would go along the railroad tracks and collect stuff that people had thrown out. Batteries were used. So black is one of those colors. And we had a woman who married into Santo Domingo, and her quest in life was to collect and create a museum for these Depression era materials, specifically the Thunderbird necklaces. So she recently passed away, and we had an exhibit of her necklaces, but then her husband donated the necklaces and other jewelry to the center because it made her dream come true of having those necklaces exhibited in a public facility, in a museum.
See, you're full of surprises.
So-
I thought you were going to talk about a peace pipe that was smoked with custard out on a hill someplace.
I'm a
in the woods.
community historian, remember?
But that's fascinating.
And I think, that shows the love between the two of them. She was non-native. He was native from Santo Domingo.
Yeah.
And he really thought long and hard about how he could honor his wife in this way.
Right.
And so that was one of the amazing stories that has come out. And, of course, they're in our collection, not in the library, but in the objects collection.
So what would let's say you conclude this project, what would your dream project be next? What would
Actually,
you love to do?
this is my dream project.
Ah,
This is very emotional for me because, as I said, 40 years ago I started as a graduate student in oral history, and this sort of closes my circle.
okay.
So I
But
think
you did a series on women firsts. The first. Can you share some of those? Let's see. Well, the first PhD, the first Native American or Hispanic? I don't know. Just tell us, what.
In the contemporary project?
Well, in some of the work you've done over the years, because I saw in your resume where that you had this thing of first by women,
Well, I've done several women's projects, among them being the New Mexico Commission on Women.
Name one or two or three of the people that you've been interviewing that you see as up and coming stars, up and coming leaders, people who are going to make a difference.
Well, in this project, it's been really interesting because all of the women are making a difference. I think I can give you some examples.
Give us some examples.
Which would be, I think, a little bit more fair. We have a young woman from San Ildefonso who is the executive director of Tiwa Women United, which is an organization of 5 northern pueblos. And they work on issues, family issues. They work on reproductive issues. They work on environmental justice issues. They work on healing. They work on repairing family dysfunction. And they do this on their own. They do it away from any government structure. They look for grants. They look for, because they didn't want to be told what they could and couldn't do. So I think she's a very interesting person, Corinne Sanchez, and I think an up-and-comer. Her mother was one of the founders of the organization, so she's intergenerational as well. We have Tara Gatewood, who is the host of National Public Radio's America Calling, is a show dedicated to Native American issues. And she's from Isleta, a very young woman. She's been a journalist, a broadcaster. She's been, in the up-and-coming world of journalism, in the Native world and outside of that. We have another journalist, Jenny Monet, who was the only accredited journalist at Standing Rock. During all of that, she was the only journalist who was arrested and went to trial, and that was an interesting set of circumstances, and because she was an accredited and credentialed journalist, which shouldn't have been really touched.
Our time is getting short. If we had viewers that wanted to visit the Pueblo Indian Cultural Center and visit the library, what is the protocol to come to the library and just study, look around, or whatever? Tell us how that would go.
We are very open to having visitors and guests who are interested in what we're doing. The library is growing. We're focused on enhancing Pueblo culture, letting students know what is in there. We also have there's so much material there that a regular university research center or this is a special, very defined collection. So we have about 190,000 vertical file collection, which are newspaper clippings, interviews, articles on anything you can think of: Mount Taylor, uranium, Chaco Canyon, alcoholism, veterans. So that's another resource that is contemporary.
Would they need to make an appointment to come in, or just call, or just come to the Cultural Center?
Well, just come to the Cultural Center. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, and by appointment. So there are lots of ways that people can use this resource. We've been targeting teachers to come and use this as a resource. So we've been very concentrated on getting teachers to come in and see what they can use in their classrooms. The Indian Pueblo Cultural Center also has a Pueblo curriculum that has been instituted and is online for teachers to use, and it's a K through 12 curriculum.
What you're doing is, as you know, creating a legacy that may be around 100 years from now. And we want to compliment you for that. Keep up what you're doing.
Thank you.
My goodness.
But,
what a magnificent work.
But it's not my legacy.
Well,
I think it's a legacy of people doing what they do every day and being honored for that.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing these stories with
Well,
us.
thank you for the invitation.
So pleased that you could come and share with us. There's never enough time. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, is there an email or a website that you would want to put out?
I have I think just calling the center and getting to me that way would be the easiest way.
Okay, and is there a central number that you can quote? Or
742, I'm sorry, area code 505-742-5500.
Very good.
Nice.
So pleased, thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you for the invitation and for an enjoyable morning with you all.
Thank you.
And until we get together again, this is Victor Wuamett with Storyteller Films
And Ben Boothe. And that's it. Have a good day.